Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Give it a few more minutes. So I know I said that Jason was going to be back this week, but I lied. Next week. So you guys get me for one more week. So let's wait just a few more minutes to see if we can get some people to jump on. Okay, let's get started and people can jump on as they get here. Is there anybody willing to start us out with a prayer this morning? Great, thank you.
Our Father, which art in heaven, at this time we thank thee for this opportunity to meet and for this class. We're grateful for those that are taking their time to teach us, and we're grateful for the opportunity to learn from them and help us gain the peace and the knowledge that we need in our lives for ourselves and also for our families. We ask that thou might watch over our loved ones at this time and bless them, that they might be able to find the road to recovery, and that most of all that they might turn their lives over to thee and recognize that thou can help them in their biggest challenges. We're grateful again for those that are taking the time to do this and for the opportunity to meet over Zoom. And we ask that thy spirit might be with us today. And we say these things humbly in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. So this morning, we are going to go over this section in the book on, hold please. I have forgotten what page it was on. My gosh, I was just like, oh, here we go. So it's on page 146, Rolling with Resistance. That's where we're going to start. But first, I want to start with some full disclosure this morning. I have been up most of the evening with well, most of the night really, with a son that is homeless in Salt Lake City right now in the middle of a blizzard in single degree weather because he got kicked out of his sober living house last night because he can't stop using. So I come today really as somebody that shows up and helps lead this conversation, but I come today with the heart of a mother, right? The heart of somebody that walks through this with every single one of you every single day. And it would be impossible for me to sit here today and walk through all of this that we go through in the book without complete full disclosure of where I am in my own walk with a loved one that's addicted. So today, I just want to say how grateful I am for you and how grateful I am that we have created a community of like-minded people that get to do this together. And so I'm grateful for this. Jason, like I said, thought he would be back today, but February has been a crazy month for him. And so he promises with that he will be here next week to lead this conversation. So today I think I tried to get here last week, but we didn't quite make it. I think one of the most important sections in the book is where we talk about rolling with resistance. So I do want to jump into that today. And then, like always, we can open a conversation for anybody that needs to share and have other people's strength and hope today. So is there anybody willing to read the beginning? It's kind of a longer section, so we can pass when somebody gets done reading, but is there anybody that's willing to start Roll with Resistance on page 146?
I can do that.
Great, thanks, Doug. And then Annie, we'll when Doug passes, then we'll have you go ahead and read. Thank you.
Okay. Roll with it. Can you hear me? Can everybody hear me? Okay. Roll with resistance. You want to gain traction in helping your addicted loved one, then you must become a master at this principle. Roll with resistance. Kind of rolls off the tongue, huh? Take it from someone who works with addicted people every single day. The most effective way to influence progress through the stages of change is to dance rather than wrestle with them. Resistance happens when there is a conflict between their view and your view of the problem and solution. The moment an addicted person feels their freedom or autonomy is being threatened, you will experience resistance again. This usually occurs when they are told what they should do and how they must do it. Pushing someone or forcing an outcome creates resistance. So does poor communication. Try changing the words should and must to suggest or invite. Semantics are important. Words have power. Every addicted person wants to feel that they have some say in their own life. If we give a suggestion or invitation rather than an order, they will be more inclined to consider them after you have built trust and rapport. Our addicted loved ones' volition or preference is a key component to long-term recovery. We can positively influence them by offering suggestions to consider while demonstrating empathy, non-judgment, and unconditional love. We need to be careful not to use words like should if we want to avoid unnecessary resistance. Learning to communicate differently will drive real results. Another important note is to avoid forcing them to act when you sense resistance. Don't lock horns with them. Instead, work to de-escalate and avoid a negative interaction by rolling with it. You can offer direct and honest reflections and feedback, but remember that in order for your relationship to be effective, there must be rapport. For example, a client named Luke came into my office and told me that he couldn't do the Brick House recovery program anymore. At this point, he had achieved 2 months sobriety and he was on a good path. But after receiving some devastating news about his employment, he panicked into fight or flight mode. He wanted to quit. As my heart sank, I remembered to put on my emotional raincoat and roll with it. Instead of responding with a list of reasons why he should stay in the program and continue working on his recovery, I simply nodded my head. Sounds like you're under a lot of pressure, brother. Will you tell me what happened? Sensing my genuine concern for him at this critical time in his life, Luke proceeded to share with me the entire story. His feelings of overwhelm, limiting beliefs that he could succeed. In that emotional state, he was wavering about his commitment. He's wavering about his. Sorry, I looked away and lost my spot. He's wavering about his commitment to sobriety, as the thoughts of drinking alcohol would take the pain away, if only for a few hours. I put my hand on his shoulder. I am so honored you would share this with me, brother, and I'm here to help you sort through this if you'd like. He then shared his fear of relapse uh, and what that would do to his relationship with his daughter and his career. He also expressed concern about the health risks if he drank again. He was in that sacred space exploring his ambivalence. My job was to empathize, offer support if he asked for it, and to listen. By the end of the conversation, Luke recommitted to the program, not because I told him he should, but because he wanted the benefits of recovery more than the benefits of another drink. I was honored to witness him create his own arguments to stay in the program and fight for his recovery. This small example of how I rolled with resistance proved to be fruitful. However, sometimes the outcome doesn't go the way I hope it will. When that happens, I can step back and feel comfort knowing that I did my part while relying on sound and proven principles. In those cases, I always leave the door open for future conversations when the other person's ready to explore their ambivalence again. As a treatment provider, most of my clients naturally dig in their heels at one point or another during my efforts to help them. This is probably because they initially view me as an authority to resist. I can relate, but after sufficient trust and rapport are built, I've learned that rolling with resistance disrupts any struggle that may occur. The process of collaboration by honoring their individual and self-efficacy through authentic empathy is a powerful combination for real results. This is a good place to mention the role of humor, and especially gentle or self-effacing humor with a client or loved one. If we can laugh about our own foibles, mistakes and mishaps, or embarrassing moments that can help us establish connection quickly. I agree with Victor Borge that laughter is the closest distance between two people.
Thanks, Doug. You guys have heard me say that, obviously I said it earlier that I believe this to be one of the most important sort of sections, because the truth is what our nature is to tell our loved one, if they would just listen to us, their life would be better. If they would just do what we tell them to do, right? We have more life experience, we have better insight, we are not in the middle of a disease, and we may even be right. But the problem is when we come in at that with that perspective, we continue to just literally push our loved one away farther and farther and farther. So that is why I think that rolling with resistance is one of the most important components of this book. And by the way, one of the most difficult areas when you're trying to deal with a loved one to be able to start implementing in your life. This, there's an emotional raincoat surrounded about with being able to roll with resistance. And the reason that is true is because the outcome is not always guaranteed. So you can roll with resistance. We do this all the time at Brick House, right? We roll with resistance and the outcome is not what we would want it to be. And so the emotional raincoat in that is that understanding that I'm going to roll, but this might not turn out the way that I want it to turn out. I would love to have a discussion today around maybe the outcomes that you guys have experienced in your own relationships with your addicted loved one, where you have rolled with resistance and maybe it didn't turn out exactly how you would wanted it to turn out at the moment, but you see the fruit maybe a month down the road, maybe 6 weeks down the road. And then I would like to compare that with those of us that struggle with rolling with resistance and how we can see that it doesn't necessarily bear fruit. By the way, in the chats today, I don't want to ignore what's happening in the chat messages today. There's a lot of us, right? There's how many of us on this call right now? 9, 10. And several of us have homeless kids right now. Several of us are are struggling to put these principles in our lives. So I do want to talk about rolling resistance, but I also don't want to ignore that there's some commonality in our experiences right now. So let me open it up, please, to just so that we can have a conversation about rolling with resistance, but also what came up for us today when I opened the call.
Well, I just want to, my heart just goes out to everybody. And I haven't had any contact with my son for over a year, and we knew where he was in Portland, Oregon, up until January, and I had been checking in with him, but in January, when I went to try to locate him, he was gone, completely gone. And I talked to some other homeless people in that area, and they just told me that he packed up and moved. So we have no idea, even where he is. And going to Portland, I mean, it looks like a third world country. I mean, it literally looks like there's garbage everywhere, and the homeless population has taken over the whole downtown core. So, as I listen to the pain is there. I would love even to have the opportunities to put some of these things into practice. But at this point in time, we don't even know where he is. We don't even know if he's alive now, as of January. So, but all of you are in the chats. Everyone's in my prayers. It's difficult. It's a difficult time, especially with the way what's going on.
Thanks, Michael.
So Jen, when you're talking about rolling with resistance, are you referring to rolling with resistance in regard to treatment, or just life principles, interactions on a daily, however often that you communicate?
That's a great question, Scott. And I think all of the above. I think that rolling with resistance is really, Jason wrote in the book, it's a principle of dancing rather than wrestling. And it's in all areas of their life. So all of the areas that they come, here's an example, a personal example. My son believes that the drugs that he's using right now are not physically addictive. They're just, all he has to do is stop taking them, right? So I could have, with my background, gone and said, that's the most ridiculous thing that I've ever heard. This is the truth. I know the truth. I'm a recovering addict myself, but that would have been more of a wrestling principle, right? So instead of that, I just listen. I just try not to prove him wrong. I try to have a conversation. I mean, I'm not going to change his opinion. So the idea is to dance so that there's less resistance. And when there's less resistance, it allows some individuality in that human being to be able to find the answers themselves. Because what we know about change is change happens when somebody discovers their truth on their own. Does that answer your question, Scott?
Well, yeah, I mean, because I've been doing this so long, I think in the beginning, it's very easy to get manipulated and to succumb to the wishes of whoever you're dealing with. And then over time, you learn how to roll and put your raincoat on and take a step back and let the consequences happen. So I've experienced it's harder in the beginning. It gets easier, but then I've fallen back into the empathetic stage now. And right now I'm just starting to get out of it, where again, today, as you saw in the chat, I had literally cut him off from his phone, his debit card, and now no money in Austin. He says, they're without power. I know they're without power. He says he's got no food. I just can't. I just cut him off today. Again, cut his phone off, blocked it, and it's pretty tough to do. So I've experienced both sides of it. And staying true to what you say you're going to do and sticking to your word and rolling can be pretty difficult at times. But I can tell you, having this group does help. Having a therapist helps, and it's pretty difficult. So I sympathize with you, Michael, and everybody else who has homeless children. Rolling with resistance and sticking to your guns is the hardest thing in the world to do.
I could not agree more. Yeah, go ahead. You guys can just unmute too when you want to say something.
I hit the wrong button.
Okay.
I had talked about my son a few weeks ago when he was in Vegas alone, and this was several years after he had been in this. He had fled Jason's treatment when that happened. But before that, he'd been living in our home because he was younger. We would drug test him, and we had rules in place that if he brought anything illegal in our home, he was done. So that happened, and we did take him to treatment in Utah, but he had fled treatment. And this was in February, and he was smart enough. He had a friend that was going to college there, and he went to the library because he didn't have a phone. He didn't have a job, no money, no nothing. So he went to the library and was able to use their computer to email his friend. He didn't tell him what was going on, but he said, hey, I need a ride home. So he showed up in Boise at our house. I'm back. But I had to stick to my guns and say, buddy, you can't be here anymore. You broke the house rules. You can't be here. At the time, he was 21, barely 21. And we all know he was brain age, probably 16. And of course, I heard lots of F-bombs and I hate you and, all of that. I just had to put on my emotional raincoat. I told him I loved him. I'm sorry this was so hard, and I knew he could figure it out. So he left angry. It was, like I said, February. It was cold like it is now. He called me later that night from the grocery store, from the gas station. He asked to use our phone. He was crying, Mom, please, I don't know what to do. I'm hungry. I don't have money. I don't have a phone. So I did say, because you have to have a little bit of empathy too. So I said, well, look, I know you're hungry. Let me come pick you up. I'll take you to go eat. So I took him to go eat dinner, and I think he was happy. I think he thought I was going to let him come home. But at the end of dinner, I said, look, we've already got a rule in place. You can't come home. But I said, we'll go to a hotel tonight, and I'll let you decide. I'm either driving you back to your treatment in Utah in the morning or to the homeless shelter. But I said, you've got the night to think about it. So in the morning, of course, he was angry and, was showing me how angry he was. He was very resistant, didn't want to go. We packed everything up. And I basically said, okay, the homeless shelter or the freeway to treatment? And he said, I guess treatment. So it was his decision. I did get him back into treatment, which he did flee again later. But anyway, those things and going through those things and sticking to my guns, eventually he did make his way back to treatment on his own. It was his own idea. And he is in recovery. Like I said, a few weeks ago, it's still a work in progress. He's still working on himself, but he's actually done quite well. He's held down a job for years, and he's working on himself and doing well. But my heart goes out to all of you because I've been there, and it's horrible. Like I said, he was very young at the time, and the only thing I could do was turn it over to the Lord and ask for peace and comfort there, because it is the hardest thing that I've ever had to do in my life, for sure.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Our son,
Go ahead. Thanks, Bonnie.
yeah, our son was addicted to meth, and over Christmas, he left and sold his laptop, holed up in a hotel, planning to stay a few days, but planning to kill himself. He added heroin to the mix, and last minute ran down to the a person at the desk to ask for help, asked them to call 911. So we got a call in the morning from the ER, and they admitted him to the psychiatric hospital. And he got out of there, and I had of course researched, you know how you do, and North Point Recovery had a spot that I reserved, and he was adamant he didn't want to go to North Point. Nope, he needed to go to Portland. And the next day he had a friend there, you know, he needed to get out of here, away from Boise. Nothing worked in Boise. And so we just kind of, okay, so I involved him in looking stuff up in Portland, and he found a whole network of services for people that don't have money, you know, like where you start, you stand in line at 7:30 in the morning for detox and see if you can get in. And then they put you in the next level of housing and the next level of housing. And we really didn't want him to do that, but he kept researching it. And anyway, he went out and used again, and came home in tears. He sat down, he just cried and cried, and he said, you know, I've done this to myself. I don't know what to do. He said, I really don't think it's going to work to go to Portland. He says, I'll go to North Point. I said, okay. So contacted them. Well, they hadn't secured that spot like they thought they had. So they said they had a spot in Washington and they would fly him out there. So he thought about it and decided he wanted to try that and to try a fresh start there. So he did go there, and he just got out, and now he's in recovery housing. It's his second day there, and he's going to do the PHP program. But he was bound and determined to go to Portland. He was absolutely adamant about not going to North Point Recovery here. So I feel like we rolled with that resistance, and then he just came to himself. He came to his own truth and just sort of saw it more clearly. So anyway, I don't know if that's helpful, but that seemed to be, you know, and what you're describing from Portland, that's what we were picturing, but we're letting him research it, you know what I mean? And just anyway, but he came to his own conclusion. So, and like I said, we're just here today, but I want to encourage everybody, and I appreciate the pain. It's been really hard. So I'm glad you guys all found this resource, because things like this can help so much. So
Thanks, Connie. I think that that's a perfect example of rolling with resistance. I know Connie's son. I've had the pleasure of working with him before, and he is a strong-headed young man that wants to do it his way, but then really panics with the consequences of his own way, right? And I think that there is a beautiful thing, and I think about this with my own child, because he's going to turn 22 on Saturday. There's something really peaceful for me that when I allow my child or any loved one or any addict for that matter, even the ones that I work with, the ability to make their own decisions, I'm also not responsible for the outcome, right? If as a parent, I'm like, I need you to go to North Point, like that's not an option. You're cut, whatever the thing is. And I send him to North Point, and he has a absolutely horrible experience. As a mother, I somehow take some of that responsibility on. I know I shouldn't. I'm not saying it's the right thing to do, but I'm just saying that that's my experience. And for me, when I have allowed my loved one, my clients, my anybody really, when I have rolled with resistance and allowed them to make their own decisions, I do not feel responsible. It allows me to put a more of an emotional raincoat on and get off the beach even more, because I'm not responsible for the outcome. I realize I'm not responsible for the outcome anyway. So
I have a question. This is Shauna.
Hi.
And I'm fairly new in this group, like I said, and just trying to figure out this dance with Devin too. He's actually in Dallas and homeless right now. And I've stopped giving him money. I am so proud of myself. Like, I bought him a meal because I'm new in this and I'm learning, and I've read the book, and it's not perfect. It's not easy, but I'm getting these tools, thank God, that can help me as well, and him. But his dilemma is he wants to come back here now, but Devin has spent 5 years in prison, 18 to 23, for residue on a spoon. He overdosed on heroin and they found residue in the spoon, and they gave him 7 years. And he got in the prison system, and of course it's full of drugs. He's a drug addict. So he got in trouble in there. And so he recently got out, and in last August, and now he's saying, well, if I come back, they're going to put me back in for 2 more years into prison. And I've talked to his PO to try and get him in treatment. And I've had Devin talk to him too, making him be accountable as well. But that's what they're going to do. They're going to put him back in prison for 2 more years. He doesn't even get the opportunity. And it's like, it's so hard for me because I'm trying to not let that, doing the dance with him, too, is him saying, what if I come back, I might leave again, because I'm not going to give him 2 more years of my life. I've already given him 5 for residue in a spoon, and there's people killing people and they get 1 year, just like that Boise State student. So I see that, and I see his dilemma, and I actually have that dilemma too. It's like, I just finally told him yesterday, I'll respect whatever you do. It's your journey. It's your, I'm not going to be a part of it. If you do come and leave, that's your thought again. But he's just really wrestling with coming back here and turning himself in and doing the right thing, or leaving and just not giving them 2 more years of his life. He's very angry about it. And I just wondered if you guys had any words for me. It's just hard.
Thank you, Shauna. First of all, I just honor your vulnerability, and I honor the struggle that you're going through right now. And I'm wondering if there are anybody in the group that can just share with Shauna.
He's just in there with the worst of the worst, and he's sick. He's not a murderer. He hasn't hurt anybody other than himself. And it's hard for me too. Sorry.
No, you don't have to apologize.
I'm interrupting myself.
You don't have to apologize at all. And I can share on this if nobody else has anything. I guess this goes back to what we can control and what we can't control, right? And the outcomes of our loved one's addiction. And the truth is, most of you know, I am a recovering addict. The truth is that when I was an addict, I didn't have control of the outcome of things, right? Like, I didn't have control over, when I broke the law, what the police were going to do. And I didn't have control over whether my family or my husband stayed married to me. Those are the consequences of addiction. And we don't necessarily get to we don't get to choose the outcome or the consequences of our disease. So I validate what you're going through right now. Unfortunately, that's what happens in this disease. Those are the areas that, we fear as parents. That's why we're all sitting here saying, oh my gosh, it's so hard to understand what we can control and what we can't, because we want to keep our loved ones from experiencing what you're experiencing right now. Right? We don't want them to die. We don't want them to go to jail. In fact, that's why we enable and fix, and because we don't want our loved ones going through what you're going through right now. The problem is we don't have any control over it. So I just want to validate, like, the strength that you're possessing right now and the walk that you're walking through, it is strength, because so many of us, it takes us so long to get there. And even to a point, sometimes it becomes impossible for people.
I have someone's coming in. Yeah, please.
So I just want to validate it. I know it doesn't fix it. Oh, she left. Anyway, to everybody, I just want to validate it without trying to fix it. Because that is, unfortunately, it's like I said, it's a perfect example of why we enable and fix, so that we don't have to go through what she's walking through right now. And I would, again, open it up for anybody to jump on and share as we, whether it's about this topic, whether it's your own experience, or whether you have examples of rolling with your loved one or not rolling with your loved one, and how that, and what the outcome to that was.
I have a thought. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, thanks. I just want to say thank you to everybody that shared. I think it's such a hard thing, and I can't imagine having a child in this situation. I'm working with my husband and his addictions he's had since he was a young teenager. So I guess I have a few thoughts and questions. Rolling with resistance, something that comes to mind is, how can that be different, or how can it be the same as denial? Because I think that over the years, my husband's gone up and down with being really strong for years and being weaker for years. And sometimes the way I roll with resistance is to not acknowledge what's going on. And I would say that would be in my younger years of kind of denial of like, okay, I'm going to just roll with his resistance by not coping, or just by kind of checking out. And then times like right now where I feel like I'm stronger and I'm rolling with resistance through talking and telling him what I'm seeing and how I'm feeling and things like that. I don't know. I guess it's just kind of, I'm curious on your thoughts on that.
Thanks, Janae. Does anybody, I again will answer it, but I would love for her to get some perspective about that from her peers. All right, you guys, you just want to listen to me talk today. Sometimes I get tired of hearing my own voice. So I think that rolling with resistance is a journey. And as you know, Shauna was talking earlier, I think the sooner that we can expect anything but perfection in ourselves in this journey, the easier and softer this experience is going to be for you. When I think about rolling with resistance, this is something that I struggled with at the beginning. Like, how is rolling with resistance not enabling? How is rolling with resistance just not completely saying, you just do whatever you want? That seems to be working for you. And then there became rolling with resistance where I just checked out, right? And that's what you're talking about. It's like just denial that this situation is even happening to me. And as I've walked in this journey, by the way, each of those stages are normal, are okay in this journey. Some of them might be more effective than others for both you and your addict, but there's nothing bad or wrong about any part of this sort of journey, especially with this issue per se. As I've grown in this, I look at rolling with resistance as, it's not a matter that but let's just give the example that I was talking about with my son, with him being physically or not physically addicted to these drugs, right? I have a strong opinion about it. I'm not in denial about it, but the decision that I've made is I'm not going to fight with him about it, right? It doesn't change my boundaries. It doesn't change my beliefs. It doesn't change my emotional raincoat. What it does is I have come to the place in my own walk where I realize if I dig my heels in and try to prove to him that I know the truth and he just doesn't have that information yet, there's just this resistance, and I'm actually causing him to maybe get there slower than if I were just allow him to get there on his own. If he were living in my house and he was using drugs in my house and I have to set up boundaries, none of rolling with resistance doesn't change boundaries. It doesn't change what you're willing to accept in the relationship. It doesn't change your truth or understanding. I would still have to allow him, I would roll with resistance, but I would not allow him to live in my house, right? Those two things can be true at the same time. I can honor the fact that he gets to figure that out on his own, but it's not going to be, I'm not going to allow him, I'm not going to get on the beach while I'm rolling with resistance. I think part of this is a journey that you're talking about. The denial part is actually where you are with your personal stage of changes. And where are you on this walk of accepting and understanding that you are dealing with a loved one that has a disease of addiction? There's a grieving process. There's an understanding process. There's a lot in that walk. And so I hope that answers your question. I know for myself personally, it was like, how do I do all of these principles that kind of feel a little enabling to me? And I had to be able to delineate really clearly how to maintain boundaries and be able to give him the self-efficacy and autonomy to make his own decisions, even if I didn't agree with them. Does that help answer that question?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I really think it does. Thank you. I think it might help to even write down some thoughts and maybe even see it visually. This, this is a boundary. This is more his part of his journey. This is my part of the journey. And just seeing it visually, I think might even help me separate the boundaries from the empathy and the denial. I don't know. It's a lot, but yeah, thank you.
I think for me too, I feel this way personally and with clients. I will work equally as hard as you work, right? So if my son is working on his recovery and he's doing the work and he's showing up, I'm going to get in the trench with him and work 100% equally as he works. But I will not work even a 1% more than he is working. So when I set up boundaries and expectations for myself, I say, okay, am I working harder than he's working right now? And if that's the case, then that moves into the enabling. So that's another thing for me personally, that really helps. I'm a very visual person, by the way. The other thing that I think about when I think about boundaries and enabling and all of and rolling with resistance, I think of myself, my addict in a trench, like literally in a trench that he has no means of getting out of right now. So he's got no ladder, he's got no rope in the depth of his disease, right? I, on the top of the trench, have the ability to put a ladder in. And I can get in the trench with my loved one and I can be there with them and I can empathize with them and I can love them and I can do all of those things. But be damn sure that I got a ladder to get myself back out of the trench. And if at any point I decide to jump in there without my ladder, then I am also stuck in that trench, right? Which is, to me, is the chaos and the enabling and the craziness and the being on the beach. That's when you're in the trench and you don't have a way to get out. That's why it's so important to put all of these philosophies in place, because the philosophies and the ideas, to me, are my ladder. and it's how I get back out. So, anybody else? Amy, I know that Amy's phone, not Amy Walker, hold for just a second. I know that you are on the chat and you didn't want to be on camera, but do you want to share? Is she there?
Sorry, I own a boutique, and so when someone comes in, I have to go. I
No worries.
apologize.
No worries at all.
I'm
Amy, are
back.
you there?
Yes, yes, thank you. Yeah, I just, I almost didn't log on because I'm just tired. And when you shared your story, I just empathize with you so much. And my 20-year-old son, he's proclaiming that he's doing fine, but he's not in active recovery. But I saw him this morning, and instead of just loving him where he's at, I just challenged him, and I said, why aren't you in active recovery? You don't look well, instead of just, dancing around the situation. And he just completely lashed out and said that. And I've never heard him say this ever. And we've just been dealing with this. This will be 2 years coming up here, but that he's in the position today because of me. And then he, continued to tell me that I needed to see a doctor and I needed to get help. And I've never heard him say that. And it's just hard because we've just given him such a beautiful life. And it's hurtful for him to say that it's because of me. And I'm the one that has taken him to rehab and been there for him and held him when he's at his lowest, and just has been really hard.
Amy, I want to put my addict hat on for a second and not a mother's hat. I want you to think of, let's just even talk about, and I know that obviously our loved ones are not zoo animals, but I want us to think of like a gorilla in a zoo right now, okay? And this gorilla is been given a substance every single day. And all of a sudden the zookeeper comes in and says, we're out. I'm sorry about that. But that's not going to happen anymore. If you can imagine, and the reason why I'm talking about it is so that you can take out the human, the emotional piece out of this for a minute and just look at it biologically, characteristically. That gorilla is going to go ape shit crazy without that chemical that they've been given every day for how many years, right? Their brain is not going to understand. There's not going to be any ability to be able to reason their way out of it. They are going to go crazy in order to get what their brain needs. And the brain is that chemical that they've been given every single day by that keeper. They're going to do what they need to do. They're going to say what they need to say. They're going to behave in a way that they need to behave.
Right.
In order to get what their brain and their body is telling them they need. Whoever they have to hurt, whatever they have to say, whoever they have to rob, whatever they have to do. And the problem with that is that as loved ones, we have this emotional tie, right? As parents, we have this thing where we already feel like it's our fault. We already have shame and guilt that our kid's an addict. We already hate ourselves because we did it wrong. So when the ape is going crazy at the zoo, They know who to hurt first. They know who to say what they need to say in order for the number one person to just give them what they want.
Sure. That makes sense.
And so it's really not your child that's telling you these things. It's really the gorilla in the pen at the zoo that doesn't understand why every single morning the zookeeper is not bringing them their drug.
Mhm.
And they will do whatever they have to do to get it.
Yeah.
And I know because I did it. I know because when I was in the last, right, when you think about, I've talked before about keeping people this far off the bottom, right? Because that's because we're not comfortable with somebody going to the bottom, right? We're
Right.
not comfortable with our child hitting rock bottom. What does that mean? Will they kill themselves? Will they overdose? Will they, like Shauna's son, will they go to prison for 7 years, right? That's why we keep people this far off the bottom. But when we say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that anymore, that's when the craziness happens. That's when the out of controlness happens. That's when the really difficult times happen.
Right.
And so I'm telling you this from my own experience of what I did in my own disease about 9 months before I got sober. I'm telling you this because it's actually working. What you're going through right now is actual progress. I know that it doesn't feel that way. I know that it hurts more than anything you've ever walked through in your life. But when an addict starts feeling so out of control, like that gorilla in the zoo, you're getting closer and closer and closer to what the actual bottom looks like. And I think I would love, by a raise of hands of those people that are on camera right now, and I know Amy, but I'll tell you, by raising your hands, can you raise your hand if you had an experience with your loved one that right before they decided to get sober, life got really crazy and they started saying really awful things and everybody, you were the worst, and right before they got to the bottom, can you raise your hand if that was your experience?
Yeah.
I can tell you right now that 90% of all of the people on camera right now have their hand raised.
Mhm. Yeah.
So the last thing I want to do is minimize the way that you're feeling, because I can like viscerally feel it right now. But what I do want to do is give you some hope and some encouragement that this is actually not a bad thing.
Okay.
Does anybody else have any words as those that had your hand raised for Amy as she's walking through this really challenging time?
Tyler did that to me. He got really angry with me and critical. And, I just encourage you. It's hard not. I went back and I questioned everything I ever did with him and everything that happened to him in his life. And if we'd only done this, and then I found myself turning on my husband, if you only hadn't been like this, or, trying to like control him, and that, I would just encourage you, it's not to go there, not to beat yourself up, not to hear it. I mean, he came back later and said, it's not your fault, Mom, but that's a long way to go, when he's not in the trenches. But I just encourage you, just, people in pain, they say, like she said, the gorilla, they say awful things, and, panicky, desperate addicts, they lash out. And I just encourage you not to question yourself, don't listen to it, don't judge yourself based on his words right now. And just try to keep walking through it, because sooner or later he has to face himself. He can't blame anyone else anymore. I don't know if that helped, but you probably have people that know exactly what kind of mother you were when you was little, and if they can
Yeah.
encourage you. It just, nobody ever wanted to end up here, and none of us ever dreamed that when they were little, right?
Never. I mean, out of all of our kids, I would have never in a million years thought
Yeah,
anybody would, they would struggle with something like this.
yeah. I'm sorry it's so
Sometimes it,
painful. But don't beat yourself up, I thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you
Connie.
for sharing.
sometimes I've heard it said, and I think Connie might have, that people, kids, if you will, others, can treat the ones that they care about the most and that care about them the most the worst, because they're more comfortable doing that to those people than they would be to someone who's not so close. So
Sure.
I know that doesn't necessarily help, but I think that makes us um, easy targets for that.
Sure. And that makes sense. I had reached out to a friend that I have that's a recovering addict, and she said that exact thing. She said, Amy, you are his safest person right now, and you are the one that he feels the most comfortable lashing out with. And you just have to set some boundaries and let him go through your husband, his dad, and kind of let him go through that right now if he's, not being respectful and if he's being so hurtful. But he just has never taken that route. He usually will cry and tell me he's sorry and that, he'll tell us, we did nothing wrong. He had such a beautiful life and it's this and that, it's his fault. And then I haven't heard him say that today. So it's just kind of, and I know I agree with you, like maybe.
Somehow you got muted, Amy. Oh, there you
Oops, I'm sorry.
go. You're okay.
Jennifer, I do relate to maybe something's going to happen soon and he's going to get help because he quit. He got in an argument with his boss last week. He quit his job and walked out. There's just lots of things in the last week. And I'm just like, he doesn't look well. It's just getting worse and worse. And then for him to say, what he said today to me, it's just, maybe he's working that direction. I don't know.
Well, I just want you to know that you have a support. I think one of the most important things for me when I started with my son was just to know that I'm not the only one, right? To me, when I felt like I was the only one walking through this, I felt like it was clearly because I was a horrible mom. It was clearly because I had done it all wrong, right? Like I would look at other families and think, well, they look perfect to me. And in reality, what I've learned through this is that there's a group of us sitting here right now who I believe with every intention in my heart that we did the very best that we could as parents. And that we aren't responsible for our loved ones' addiction. And we, when it works, it's not our responsibility either, right? When they do it and they're successful, it's not because of us.
No.
When they're in the trenches, it's also not because of us. And that's not to say that we all don't have room for personal growth and experiences. And maybe our family didn't function the way we wish that it did, but it can starting today. It can starting today. And we can continue to grow as people, as our loved ones grow through this disease. Because the truth is, we all, as a recovering addict, right? I've always had to struggle specifically with my husband when he was like, "It's all your fault." The truth is, we danced together in our relationships, right? We stayed married for 14 years in my disease because he also was getting something out of it. And so I look at that now with my children is like, okay, what is my part about the way that this disease has manifested itself in my family? And how can I starting today do that different?
Right.
And the principles of this book and the principles that we talk about is exactly how you do it different, with love and compassion and empathy and boundaries and getting off the beach and all of those things that protects your own heart, but also gives your loved one the most fighting chance at recovering from this disease. So I am humbled by everybody's vulnerability today. I am it never falls far from me that I just, God puts people in situations at time that need each other to be able to walk through this stuff together. I am headed this weekend down to Salt Lake, not because my son's homeless, but because it is his birthday weekend and we were planning on going down. So we're going to go down. So I would appreciate everybody's prayer that this mama doesn't get into a rescue mode, and that, she can live these principles in her own life like she teaches them to others. And I will be in prayer for everybody else today as we do this together. And I'm so grateful for that.
Mm. Thank you so much.
I promise you. Jason will be here next week. I promise.
No, thank you, Jennifer.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, everyone.
Hi, thanks for sharing. Good luck.
For you all.